Now, Sam, it is budget night, and we know the country is set to hit a deficit of about 200 billion. But the coalition seems to be getting off quite lightly. Well, if you remember, Kevin Rudd copped an absolute hammering, and it kind of does beg the question: is the coalition simply better at spin than the Labor Party?
Uh, I suspect so, but they're also a lot better at it. It's all about the expectation game too. So, because you expect Conservative governments to spend as little as possible on things like health and education,
Yeah.
and to Labor governments to go heavily into debt, because that's kind of your preconceived expectation, you end up with this kind of situation where when one does opposite to type, they get away with it a lot more. You're right. There is no way a $200 billion deficit get away with. And at the same time, strangely, Labor governments can occasionally get away with cuts in health and education that no Conservative government could ever be getting away with. What's going to be interesting tonight is the optics have changed. The optics of budgets that was all about the family. It was like a 3-day media event. What's fascinating is how quickly all that's moved. And so you'll have a budget tonight. No one cares. It's unbelievable, right?
I agree.
Like, we're talking about $200 billion. You could have read off that sheet that it was $100 billion of debt or $500 billion of debt, and everyone would have just nodded the same way. It's incredible how little in this environment these things matter. But the optics that do matter is the government's going to try and do this whole. Look, I personally believe, I think the really important thing to watch tonight is when the infrastructure money is going to be spent. They're talking about it all being out the door by about May next year, March next year. If that's the case, expect an early election around the middle of next year. That's why I think
Sam,
we're
you're
heading.
calling it an early election around May next year.
I think between around May to June, because here's what's going to happen, right? You're going to end up with a lot of infrastructure, a lot of money getting pumped into the economy. Things are going to go very bad when JobKeeper and that end up getting cut or kind of diminished. At the moment, it's going through to March next year. It might get a tiny extension beyond that. If you're this government, you want to be at the polls before the pain really, really hits. And all the economists are saying the pain's going to be the really hard pain. Looking at September to October next year, you want to have your election before then. And I think tonight will actually tell us whether or not we're going to the polls.
It's the Ben, Rob and Robbo, Ben, Rob and Robbo, Ben, Rob and Robbo Show.